the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from the Pleasantries of the Incredible Mulla Nasrudin by Idries Shah. This audio has been made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Or else. Nasrudin went through the village, shouting,
"I have lost my saddlebag. Just find it,"
he continued in a thunderous voice.
"Or else."
Alarmed, people went in all directions to look for the bag. Eventually, it turned up. "What would you have done, Mullah," someone asked, "if we had not found it?"
"I would have made myself another one out of some material which I have in my workshop."
How long is too long? A man wanted to dock the tail of a horse. He asked the mullah how long he should make it.
"It makes little difference," said Nasrudin, "because irrespective of what you do, opinions will differ. Even your own opinion from time to time. Too long, no, too short."
Anachronism. Why are you sitting at the crossroads, Mullah?
"One day something will happen here, and a crowd will gather. When that comes about, I may not be able to get close enough, so I'm putting in my time now."
No time to waste. Nasrudin ran to an appointment in a nearby town, stark naked. People asked him why.
"I was in such a hurry to get dressed that I forgot my clothes."
Altruism. Again and again Nasrudin tried to tie a turban out of a piece of material which he had been given, but it was too short. Eventually he took it to the market and gave it to an auctioneer to sell for him. When the sale started, he heard the auctioneer praising the cloth to the skies, and the bidding rose and rose.
"I cannot stand to hear so many good things said about a wretched piece of cloth which has caused me so much trouble," thought the mullah. "Am I to conceal the shortcomings of such an unworthy thing?"
So he stole up to the man who had made the last bid and whispered to him,
"That muslin is hardly worth buying for a turban. It is a short length."
Perhaps there is a road there. Some small boys planned to steal the mullah's slippers and run away with them. They called to him and pointed to a tree. "Nobody could climb that tree."
"Any of you could," said Nasrudin, "and I shall show you."
Removing his slippers, he tucked them into his belt and began to climb. "Mullah," they cried, "you won't need your slippers in a tree." Nasrudin, who had sensed without knowing why that he should take his slippers with him, reproved them.
"And be prepared for every emergency. For all I know, I might find a road up there."
The announcement. Nasrudin stood up in the marketplace and started to address the throng.
"O people, do you want knowledge without difficulties, truth without falsehood, attainment without effort, progress without sacrifice?"
Very soon a large crowd gathered, everyone shouting, "Yes, yes!"
"Excellent," said the mullah. "I only wanted to know. You may rely upon me to tell you all about it if ever I discover any such thing."
What is above and what is below? A headstrong grandee had obtained from the Sultan the rights of sharecropping on the land occupied by Nasrudin. When the clerk asked him what crop he wanted to share, he merely said, "Just put in whatever is above the ground." He presented himself at the mullah's house with the order duly sealed. But that year Nasrudin had planted turnips, and the above-ground share did not amount to much. The following year the townsman arrived for his share, having had specified on his order the whole crop below ground. This year, however, the mullah was growing wheat. The Speculator. Nasrudin bought a large number of eggs and at once sold them at a price lower than the cost. When asked why he did it, he said, "Surely you don't want me to be called a profiteer?" Louder than an ox. Nasrudin stole a bullock, killed it, and removed the skin. The owner traced the crime to him and started shouting and wailing. "Strange," said Nasrudin, "how cause and effect operates. I kill an animal, and the owner behaves as if he is being flayed." I did not start it. Nasrudin went to a mosque and sat down. His shirt was rather short, and the man behind him pulled it lower, thinking it looked unseemly. Nasrudin immediately pulled on the shirt of the man in front of him. "What are you doing?" asked the man in front. "Don't ask me. Ask the man behind. He started it." In the mosque. Nasrudin was sitting meditating in a mosque at the end of a row of the faithful. Suddenly one, involuntarily, said, "I wonder whether I have left the fire burning at home." His neighbour said, "You have broken your silence and spoilt the prayer. Now you will have to say it again." "So have you," said the next man. "Praise be to Allah," said Mulla Nasrudin aloud, "that I have not broken silence." Eggs. A group of youths took eggs to a Turkish bath where Nasrudin was expected. When he came into the steam room where they were sitting, they said, "Let us imagine that we are fowls and see whether we can lay eggs. The one who fails shall pay the bath fee for all." Nasrudin agreed. After a little cackling, each one took an egg from behind him and held it out. Then they asked Nasrudin for his contribution. "Among so many hens," said Nasrudin, "surely there will be one cock." Allah will provide. "Allah will provide," said Nasrudin one day to a man who was complaining that someone had stolen some cash from his house. The man expressed doubt. Nasrudin took him to the mosque and rolled on the ground, calling upon Allah to restore the man's 20 silver coins. Annoyed by his presence, the congregation made a collection, and the sum was handed to the surprised loser. "You may not understand the means which operate in this world," said the mullah, "but I trust that you understand the end when it is handed to you in such a concrete form." The school. One of the boys at the mullah's school asked, "Which was the greatest achievement, that of the man who conquered an empire, the man who could have but did not, or the man who prevented another from doing so?" "I don't know about any of that," said the mullah, "but I do know a more difficult task than any of those." "What is that?" "Trying to teach you to see things as they really are." Clairvoyance. "Hey, Mullah!" shouted a haughty nobleman as he passed Nasrudin on the road. "Which of these turnings do I take for the capital?"
"How did you know that I was a mullah?" asked Nasrudin.
The other had merely used the word at random, but wanted to score off this bumpkin. "I can read people's minds."
"Very well," said Nasrudin, making off. "Read the way to the capital, then."
Invisible extension. Nasrudin saw a man selling a beautifully made sword in the market.
"How can a piece of steel be worth 50 gold pieces?" he asked.
The auctioneer saw that he was no connoisseur of art and said, "This is a magical sword. In battle it stretches itself by several feet and outreaches the enemy." Within minutes the mullah was back with a pair of fire tongs.
"Sell these," he told the auctioneer, "and note that the reserve price is 100 gold pieces."
"I hardly think you will get more than a few coppers for these," said the man.
"Nonsense," said the mullah. "They may appear to be ordinary enough tongs, but when my wife throws them at me, even from 30 feet, they leap across the gap invisibly extended."
Mistaken identity. Mulla Nasrudin had had words with the sheikh of a monastery where he was staying. One day a bag of rice was missing, and the chief ordered everyone to line up in the courtyard. Then he told them that the man who had stolen the rice had some grains of it in his beard. "This is an old trick to make the guilty party touch his beard," thought the real thief, and he did not move.
"The chief is out to revenge himself upon me," thought Nasrudin, "and he is certain to have planted rice in my beard. I had better brush it off as inconspicuously as possible."
He clawed his fingers through his beard and found everyone looking at him.
"I knew that you would get me sooner or later," said Nasrudin.
Deductive reasoning. "How old are you, Mullah?" someone asked.
3 years older than my brother."
"How do you know that?"
"Reasoning. Last year I heard my brother tell someone that I was 2 years older than him. A year has passed. That means that I am older by 1 year. I shall soon be old enough to be his grandfather."
Let it be wheat. A neighbour asked Mullah Nasrudin to stand by him in a case of disputed possession of some grain. "Did you see the transaction?" the judge asked Nasrudin.
"Yes, I distinctly saw the sacks of barley change hands."
"But this case is concerned with sacks of wheat, not barley."
"That is irrelevant. I am here to say that my friend is right. As a false witness, surely I can say anything without its being held against me."
The genius. Nasrudin's little son was prattling away.
"Daddy, I remember the day when you were born."
The mullah turned triumphantly to his wife.
"There you are, Karima. Surely that proves that this child of mine is a genius."
Why? A local busybody, wanting to be rewarded for bringing good tidings, ran to the mullah's house one day. "Nasrudin, good news."
"What is it?"
"They are baking cakes next door."
"What is that to me?"
"But they are going to give you some."
"What is that to you?"
It is what he says that counts. A cruel neighbour wanted to borrow Nasrudin's donkey.
"I'll have to ask his permission," said the mullah.
"All right, go and ask him." Nasrudin soon came back from the stable.
"I am sorry. He is endowed with prescience, and says that the future does not augur well for your relationship with him," he told the man.
"What does he see in the future, then?"
I asked him. He simply said, "Long journeys and short meals, sore bones and scuffed knees."
What will he find? "There is a burglar downstairs," said Nasrudin's wife one night.
"Not a sound," whispered the mullah. "If he finds anything here, he will have to bring it into the house himself first. He may even leave something behind."
Just for the asking. "I hear that you have some vinegar which is 40 years old," a neighbour said to Nasrudin. "Will you give me some?"
"Certainly not," said the mullah. "It would not be 40 years old if I kept giving it away, would it?"
We come and we go. "Where do we come from, and where do we go to, and what is it like?" thundered a wandering dervish.
"I don't know," said Nasrudin, "but it must be pretty terrible."
A bystander asked him why.
"Observation shows me that when we arrive as babies we are crying, and many of us leave crying, and reluctantly too."
The Karkorajami. "What is a Karkorajami?" someone asked Nasrudin's little boy, who had been talking about fairy tale characters.
"Why, what its name means," said the boy. "It is a blind, deaf, and dumb walking thing." "Yes," interrupted the mullah, "and I taught it to be those things."
The smell of a thought. Nasrudin was penniless, and sat huddled in a blanket while the wind howled outside.
"At least," he thought, "the people next door will not smell cooking from my kitchen, so they can't come round to catch some food."
At that the thought of hot, aromatic soup came into his mind, and he savoured it mentally for several minutes. There came a knocking on the door.
"Mother sent me," said the little daughter of his neighbour, "to ask whether you had any soup to spare. Hot, seasoned soup." "Heaven help us," said Nasrudin. "The neighbours even smell my thoughts."
The burglar. A thief went into Nasrudin's house and carried away almost all the possessions of the mullah to his own home. Nasrudin had been watching from the street. After a few minutes, Nasrudin took up a blanket, followed him, went into his house, lay down, and pretended to go to sleep. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" asked the thief.
"Well," said the mullah, "we were moving house, were we not?"
A matter of time, not place. A man called, wanting to borrow a rope.
"You cannot have it," said Nasrudin.
"Why not?"
"Because it is in use."
"But I can see it just lying there on the ground."
"That's right, that's its use."
"How long will it stay in use like that, mullah?"
"Until such a time as I feel that I want to lend it," said Nasrudin.
All in my wife's name. Nasrudin was eating a huge roast chicken one day when a poor man passed by and said, peering through the window, "Please give me some of that bird, for I am starving."
"Willingly," said Nasrudin. "For my part, I would give you all of it. but unfortunately it belongs to my wife.
Waiting for the yeast to rise. Nasrudin's wife sent him to the river for water. She could not go, she explained, though it was women's work, because she was waiting for the dough to rise. The mullah wandered to the riverside, reached in with a pot, and lost it in the water. An hour later he was still sitting there, looking steadily into the water. Someone passing by asked him what he was doing.
"Waiting," he said, "for the dough to rise."
Even fire. The mullah tried to get his fire going, but the embers would not produce a flame, no matter how he puffed on them. Losing his temper, he shouted,
"I'll bring my wife if you don't light,"
and puffed all the harder. The charcoal glowed more strongly, so he snatched up his wife's hat and put it on to increase the effect. Suddenly he saw a flame. Nasrudin smiled.
"Even fire is afraid of my wife."
Later than you think. Deciding, for once, to fast for the 30 days of Ramadan, Nasrudin thought he would keep count by putting 1 stone for every day into a pot. His little daughter, seeing her father do this, started to carry stones from all over the garden and put them in the pot too. Nasrudin knew nothing of this. A few days later, some travellers passing by asked him how many days of the fasting month had passed. Nasrudin hurried to his pot and counted the stones. Then he came back and said, 45. But there are only 30 days in a month.
I do not exaggerate, said the mullah, with dignity. Far to the contrary. The actual number is 153.
This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.